Call to order the May 18th meeting of the Statesville City Council, and ask you to rise for the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Bow with me. We thank you for the opportunity to gather together this day. We ask for your hand of blessing on this meeting. We ask that you would guide and direct our meeting so that it is full of wisdom, productivity, and respect for one another. Thank you for helping us to accomplish our work and our goals this day. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. All right. During our pre-agenda meeting, we removed item 10 from the agenda, and I believe that was the only change. With that change, is there a motion that we adopt the agenda? All right, motions and second. All in favor, please say aye. Are any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. I want to announce first that an item TA 20-01, which is a text amendment to the Unified Development Ordinance to amend Article 9, Adult Child Home Daycare to allow a maximum of 12 children instead of 8, was advertised, and it was to be on this agenda, but after advertising it was pulled, so it will be re-advertised for a later date. And also, we have not received any public comments nor comments on the budget. I think there will be comments on the other public hearings, but what we're going to do is we are required under the one of the executive orders to keep a public to keep any public hearing or public comment period for a period of 24 hours after the meeting was conducted, if it's being conducted in some remote fashion. So what I'm going to suggest is that we will say that if no comments come in on a particular topic in the next 24 hours, then that public hearing will be closed. If something does come in, then we will keep the public hearing on that matter open until the June 1st meeting, at which time we'll insert those comments into the record and close that particular public hearing. All right, we'll go into the consent agenda. As I said, no one signed up to be heard during the public comment period. I apologize. So we'll move to the consent agenda. These are items that are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a council member so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered with the other items listed in the regular agenda. Item A is to consider approving the May 4th, 2020 City Council meeting minutes. B is to consider approving a waiver agreement and an ordinance and a clerk's certificate for the waiver agreement in order to receive wholesale power bill electronically through email from Electricities and NCMPA 1. Item C is to consider approving a contract line crew labor contract with Sumter Utilities Incorporated with an initial purchase order amount of $300,000, and I think we wanted that subject to review by our city attorney. And item D is to consider approving a request to demolish the fire-damaged detached garage located at 628 West End Avenue to allow the owner to plant grass and rebuild a garage subject to approval by the HPC. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Jap and second by William. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item 7 is to hold a public hearing on the proposed fiscal year 2020-2021 budget. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you mentioned, we have received no comments on the budget thus far. It was presented to you at the last meeting, May 4th, and we will begin our budget discussions tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock. As you also stated, that we'll keep the public hearing open and solicit any comments that we get in the next 24 hours. Although I don't expect any. We haven't had a lot of interest in this particular budget. Luckily, it's been flat, and hopefully those comments remain flat with it. So I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have. Chris Tucker, our finance director, is also on the phone, but I suspect we'll be getting into a deep dive tomorrow.
Budget meeting be broadcast live?
I don't think we're planning to do a live broadcast on the budget meeting. I mean, I think we have the capability of doing it. But I don't know that we were planning on doing so.
Because the public can't come to it, so.
Oh.
You are planning on having it live?
Oh, my
Thank you.
apologies.
All right, I'm going to declare the public hearing on the budget open. There are no comments. And I'm going to close the public hearing subject to what I stated before, which is it's open for comments for 24 hours. If comments are received, it will remain open until June the 1st, at which time those comments will be read. Otherwise, the public hearing will be declared closed at this time tomorrow. All right. Item 8 is to conduct a public hearing and consider approving site plan P20-03 quasi-judicial filed by Beretta Development for many warehouses located at 1739 Wilkesboro Highway. And I think Mr. Matt Grant and Mr. Ken Whitley are on the line for this matter. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes.
All right, I'm going to wait for Miss Ashley to get in here, and I'm going to swear each of you in, please. Sherry, Mr. Grant and Mr. Whitley are on the line, and I'm going to ask if you all will raise your right hand. Sherry, you can put your left hand on the Bible. Good. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
I do. I do.
Thank you very much. Miss Ashley, go ahead.
Okay. This is the quasi-judicial hearing for P20-03 Beretta Development. It's for many warehouses proposed at 1739 Wilkesboro Highway. Oops, I don't know why I did that. You have the aerial map up on the screen to show you the location. It is behind the old Wilkes Shopping Center. It has Food Line and Old Bob's. I think most of you know pretty much that location off Wilkesboro Highway. It's over 2.5 acres of land. They've already dedicated the right-of-way needed for Wilkesboro Highway, NC 115 North. They're proposing 3 buildings at this location, 26,154 square feet of mini storage warehouses. They do meet the parking requirements. They're required to have 14 parking spaces. Their landscape plan shows you they're retaining a lot of existing vegetation around the site, but they are having to do some additional landscaping that has been provided and is in compliance with the Unified Development Code. They are paying the fee in lieu of for sidewalks instead of installing them, and NCDOT did not require curb and gutter along NC 115. And then we'll talk about on the next slide, they were granted variances to use utilitarian metal exterior on some of the walls of these buildings. Our current code does require you to use wood, stone, brick, or architectural metal. So the Board of Adjustment did grant variances for Building 1, which you'll see here up on the screen. That building will be brick on all three sides. That's the most prominent building from NC 115. It will have metal on the back side where the blue line is shown. And if I go down here to Building 2 at the bottom of your screen, that building will have brick just on this side that you can see from Wilkesboro Highway, but on the remaining three sides, it will be the utilitarian metal. And then Building 3, a little more north of the site, it's kind of tucked in behind Building 1, that would be all utilitarian metal. And that was contingent upon also putting in a larger buffer. The red circle down at the south side of this site plan shows that they had to increase the landscape buffer from 8 feet to 10 feet, and that was basically to be able to put in an opaque type of vegetative screening. So that's been indicated on the site plan, so they are meeting the conditions of the variance request. And then I'll have the elevations just kind of show you. The top elevation is the front of Building 1. That's the brick. That's kind of the type of brick they'll use for Building 1 and 2. And then you'll see below that the metal doors, garage doors, and the metal utilitarian siding. You'll see it again on this south side wall elevation. It's pretty typical. And then the bottom two pictures are just kind of some color, actual color examples of the brick and then of the metal. This was approved by your technical review committee on April 1st. It had a couple contingencies, and that would be, one, they provided a copy of a cross-access easement agreement, because if you notice on the site plan, they are using the same driveway as Food Line uses for the loading behind their store. So we do require a cross-access easement agreement, and they needed to get final approval of their stormwater plans. And on the site plan, it's a combination of above ground and sand filters for the stormwater detention. Planning Board unanimously recommended approval of this site plan with a couple more contingencies, and that is based on the landscaping being met for the street yard and the north and west boundaries. If existing vegetation is deficient or removed, especially on the west boundary, it looks a little thin through there. So after they grade and build the site, if they need to install additional landscaping, we'd like to have that contingency and option to be able to require that. Also, basically getting the cross-access agreement on the driveway and approval of stormwater plans. Other than those three, this plan does meet the requirements of your Unified Development Ordinance, and therefore staff's recommendation would also be favorable as presented. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. I know Mr. Whitley and Mr. Grant are also on the phone.
That's correct. Are there any questions of Mrs. Ashley before I declare the public hearing open?
Yes, Sherry, the Board of Adjustments gave a variance on the siding. What was their justification on that?
It was basically on sides of the building that you could not see from Highway 21.
So are we going to need to change our UDO if every time, I know we've come up against this on other issues. If we're saying it can't be done but yet Board of Adjustments changes it, is this going to be an ongoing?
Your staff will be recommending a text amendment to you because in your B3, B4, and B5 zoning districts, there are some uses, and I'm going to use mini storage as a perfect example, where it's very difficult to enforce architectural standards on mini warehouses. So staff, and based on variances granted by the Board of Adjustment, your staff is going to provide you a text amendment to consider to change that.
All right, thank you. And then one of the things in talking to a couple of the neighbors, on our site plan on page, bear with me, 42, that is incorrect. This does not go into that other neighborhood and take up that house site as proposed on our site plan. Is that correct?
What site plan do you have? Okay. Okay, you have the aerial map, that right there?
Right, you've cut it
Okay.
back in that one, I know.
This map, I'm not sure why in your packet it extends into this area right here, but that's not true. Those are existing subdivision lots. It does
And I
not go that
explained
far.
that to the, because the other site plan doesn't show it as such, and the ownership, I looked up, doesn't show it as such. I want to
Okay.
just,
Yeah, this,
solidify
I'm
that.
sorry, I don't know, this one is incorrect. I don't know why it's showing it going that far, but it does not.
okay. Could I get that back?
Yes.
Thanks. Got all my notes on the back.
Miss Ashley, if I could ask a question. It is in, yeah, thank you. It is in close proximity to residential dwellings there. Does our ordinance have any stipulation as far as what type of lighting? Is it a directed lighting that's directed toward the interior of the property? Do we address that at all?
Our ordinance requires lighting to be directed downcast. It cannot shine or be directed toward residential uses. If it is, if we get complaints about that, then what we do is we notify the property owner to correct that.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions?
I guess I'll ask one more, Sherry. So as we move forward with this, we can require an opaque border on the, I guess it'd be western side?
That could be a condition. The ordinance already requires a fairly large buffer, and they're proposing not to disturb that area. But when I rode out there, to me, I could see the house through there, and so I feel like once they do the grading and get the site under construction, once it goes up, if there's not enough, then we will require there to be additional
Right.
landscaping
And
installed.
plus that, what is there is deciduous. Yeah, okay,
May
thank you.
lose its
What is
leaves in
there,
the
what'd you
winter.
say, John? It's what?
What is there is deciduous, so once the
Deciduous.
leaves are off, yeah.
So there could be a requirement to install, and that was one of the conditions that planning board and staff recommended.
All right, I will declare the public hearing open. Mr. Grant and Mr. Whitley, were you able to halfway hear what was going on, and do you have any comments?
I was able to hear it. Mr. Whitley, yes, I do not have any comments. Yes, this is Mr. Grant. Yes, I heard. My only comment on that western property line that's in discussion is our site's going to be cut down on that end. So you're going to look into over top of the buildings from the western side. Again, if our landscaping doesn't meet the requirements, then we'll do what's necessary. Please understand that the buildings are almost at grade at that side of the property, the tops of the building. So we're putting in a retaining wall. We're cutting that drive out with a big cut slope. So it won't be too overbearing as a visual problem.
All right, thank you. Anything? Sherry?
I have a question for Leah. I went out and spoke to the property owners along the back of this, and the day I'd gone out there, I guess it was Saturday or Sunday, I had received an email saying that they wanted this postponed, and my understanding of the law was if there was a request to postpone a quasi-judicial, it was automatically postponed. So I told the owner, the property owner said, how will I be able to attend the meeting if I can't come there? And I said, you don't need to worry about it because it's been postponed. Well, now we're moving forward with it. So in fairness to him, I wanted to ask Leah, because I told him directly that the meeting was postponed due to that email that we'd received of a request for it to be in person.
Is this I guess I would need to understand, is this an adjoining property owner that has standing? Sherry, do you know the property that he's referring to?
I didn't hear a word she said.
She said, does this property owner have standing? Are they an
Yeah, they're
adjacent
directly
property
behind
owner?
it. They're adjacent to it, yeah. In fact, they're contiguous with it.
Do they have to make their request, would they have to make their request between now and tomorrow at this time?
I think that would be the most appropriate since they really haven't contacted the city in a direct way. I I would also warn that this is a quasi-judicial procedure. To talk to the property owners prior to the hearing, you have to disclose to the board the entirety of that conversation in making your decision, since it's a quasi-judicial decision.
I couldn't tell what she said. I don't know. Who heard what she said? Would you?
What she's saying is that being a quasi-judicial hearing, John, you need to let the rest of the council know what the entirety of the discussion.
Well, that's good, because I did want to, because the one property owner voiced three primary concerns, and I hope that the folks online can hear these. The first question was, is it a 24-hour access into this facility? And if we could limit that to not be 24 hours, that was a request. The second was lighting, that there would be no lighting coming off of that site onto their backyard and into their property, which Sherry answered that if there is, we can ask them to adjust
Now, I'm
that.
not saying no lighting. You might have some, but it's not directly cast towards them. I mean, when you light up a property adjacent to you that hasn't been lit up before, you're going to have some light.
Right.
So
but-
you got to be reasonable about that.
Yeah, but he doesn't want his, that's pretty secluded there, and they don't want to have daylight at night in their backyard. And then the third is he wanted to ask for a opaque buffer along that west wall.
Opaque buffer along the west wall. Well, you said the buffer is going to be, the western buffer is going to, well, and they acknowledged that they would make it, I don't know what constitutes an opaque. I mean, I know what opaque means.
I would say evergreen, yeah.
Well,
That's enough.
if I can, I'd like to step in here. Again, the site is cut down on this western side. So this adjoining property owner is not going to have effects from vehicular traffic lights, again, because of the change of grade. And again, with the site lighting, if we've got directional lighting pointing down, like Sherry said, you're going from the site with no light to light, you're going to have some lighting on his site, but it should not be adversely affecting him. Secondary, you've got a 30-foot buffer there, which is meeting, again, once we do our grading, if we don't meet the requirements, we are more than willing to make that buffer match those current requirements of the city.
And is it a 24-hour facility?
Ken?
Yes, sir. The gate will have an access code that we were planning on having 24-hour access if somebody wanted it, but the chances of somebody being in there at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning are very small. There's very little traffic on the self-storage facility anyway. But the gate will be closed at all times. The only people who will have access to get into the property are people who have a unit that are a paying customer. So there's not a case where people who aren't a paying customer will be able to just drive in there and sit back and park or do anything like that. So,
All right, and so Sherry, to address the 3 points that John has made, they said it's 24 hours, and there's nothing that would allow us to reject it because it's 24 hours.
You can ask the owner if they would be willing to add that as a condition, but I think Mr. Whitley pointed out, and if you look on the site plan, there is a gate. If you pull in that driveway between building 1 and 2, there is a gate. You have to have a code to get in there. So not just anybody and everybody can come and access the site. There's also fencing between buildings 1 and 3, and then buildings around the little cul-de-sac radius between buildings 2 and 3. So you can't get in and out of this site unless you have your access code. And, you know, that's what the buffers are there. There's buffers on the sides of the property to help reduce with noise, lighting, those kinds of things. That's what your buffers do.
And I think Mr. Grant was saying that once the grading takes place, that it's going to minimize the impact of the lighting on those properties to the west. Is that what I heard him to be saying?
My understanding is because of the topo changes, right, Mr. Grant?
That's correct, yeah. So this, on the west end, we're cutting that site down and building a retaining wall around the back end of building 2. And then there's a cut slope down to our turnaround. So elevation-wise, we're going to be below grade of this neighbor's backyard.
All right.
Just as a matter of housekeeping, John, I got an email on Saturday as well, referring to essentially the same thing that you referred to, but it was from a resident of Beverly Drive,
Right.
across 115. And of course, they don't have standing, so that's not necessarily an issue. So as a matter of housekeeping, if you would share that email that you received with all of us on council and with the planning department, I would appreciate that.
Sure, I thought it went out to everybody. Did you receive it, Costi?
No, not the one that you're speaking about. I
Nope.
received the one that William talked
I
about.
received the one
I've
from
never received
the
it.
Beverly Drive resident.
Leah chiming in.
Say what? Say that again, Leah.
This is Leah chiming in. I haven't received the letter or the email either, so this is the first I'm hearing
Yeah.
that.
Well,
we have somebody-
You,
Costi, this email went to you, to myself, to Steve Johnson, to William Morgan, and to Ron.
that's not,
And
that's,
that is from the resident of Beverly Drive.
yeah.
Right,
So that,
And she does not have standing,
correct.
and we don't,
yeah, you
we don't have
indicated
to-
that someone who did have standing talked to you.
Yes, I did. They did not email me. I talked to them directly. Yeah.
well, then
We also.
why are we discussing this?
No, I'm sorry, William. I told the person who had standing that an email had come in asking for this to be postponed. I did not, when I was told the law.
So you were unaware that you had to have standing to have
What's
it
that?
postponed?
I believe
Okay.
that anybody that made a request to postpone a quasi-judicial hearing had standing.
So you have no request from the property owner adjacent that has standing to postpone this?
He asked how he would be able to attend the
He
meeting.
asked you verbally, but you have no commitment or request, and the planning department has no request from this property owner to
Not at this
suspend.
time, no. No.
Leah, what do you say to that?
I don't think that I understand. Who is the person that's objected to the proceeding? Is it an adjoining property owner with standing?
No, Leah, the
Oh.
person that had asked for it to be postponed is a resident of Beverly Drive, which is probably 2/10 of a mile away from the site, and they do not have standing.
Opposite side of the street?
But Leah, what happened is John talked to someone who has standing. And the question is, does that rise to the level and that they can get a postponement? And secondly, given the standard of review, do they want to postpone it anyway? So, but would you think that even rises to the level where they can seek a postponement?
John, can you tell me again what your exact conversation with this person was that actually does have standing to contest this?
It was exactly what he recited about 10 minutes ago, that they talked about it and that he represented to the individual that since they had standing that they could have it postponed since they couldn't appear, and that he had those 3 questions about lighting 24 hours and the opaque buffer on the west, toward the west.
And to clarify, there was one other question, and that was it coming through onto their street? And I told him, to my understanding, that was misdrawn. Apparently, he had looked at the plans in our package.
What I really need to confirm, John, is that did you make a representation to him that he did not need to do anything further to contest the hearing proceeding forward, and that and that this would automatically be continued. He didn't need to worry about it.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
I didn't hear it either.
She said, did you relay to that person yourself that they didn't have to do anything further to have it delayed?
I did. Yes, I did.
So I think that based on John's representation, I think that our hands are a little bit tied there. I know that we haven't received a formal objection from the homeowner or a written objection as we normally would or would request, certainly. But I think that I think it's reasonable for this homeowner who's not doing anything else to contest the proceeding to go forward. I think it's reasonable for them to probably rely on a representation from their city councilman. But I think that based on John's representation and Bill 704, I think that we will have to continue the hearing.
All right, so we leave the public hearing open until we can convene live.
Well,
I'm going to.
Costi, can I
The record.
see if we can amend this?
Wait, yeah.
This is.
Wait a minute, Matt, wait a minute.
If the developer felt that they could meet the requirements of the buffer and the lighting, and this resident was made aware of that, he may not have objection to it. So could we go forward with our process and give him the opportunity that if he has a question, that he has 24 hours to propose that question? And we move
Well,
forward.
that would be wonderful, and I guess the question then
Yes.
becomes, can we give conditional?
Yes, but if that homeowner also at the same time tells us he objects to having the hearing remotely in this way, our hands are tied at that point and we have to continue it.
Yeah, but he might withdraw his objection, is what John is saying.
He seemed to
Yes,
air them to me.
Well, would it be possible for us to just hold what we got here for 10 minutes and let you try to call him and explain?
I don't have a number for him. I was in person. I'm sorry, yeah.
Well, I mean, this is crazy.
I'm glad you said that, not me.
Doris, you need to speak into the microphone, please.
That one up there,
This one too.
I like to say that in reference to what we've already heard coming through Councilman Stafford, that we're not sure that what the protocol is.
We are sure what the protocol is, and that is
Has it
that,
been followed in the right perspective, because we have more questions than answers?
no, we've got all the answers. The question is, what, and Mr. Stafford brought this up himself, that the person who spoke to him may, knowing the answers to the questions, may not object to our going forward. Is that correct?
correct, yeah.
But we don't know how to find that out, and I think what John is asking is, if he speaks to this person, and the person says, okay, I'm fine with it, can we go ahead and give, if the council's so inclined, can we go ahead and give tentative approval to move forward, or what's the most efficient way to go forward? I mean, we're wasting our time right now.
Do we have to we're keeping this open for 24 hours, isn't that correct?
Well, yes, but as far as I understand, that's simply for the purpose of determining whether the public hearing can be closed, and if there's further comment, then the public hearing would be open for the purpose of taking those comments at the June 1st meeting.
I think that my suggestion would be leave it open, let's continue out the hearing, leave it open for 24 hours, and then see if John can get in touch with the homeowner, or the planning department honestly needs to be the one to reach out to the homeowner, because it's a quasi-judicial proceeding. So you guys shouldn't continue to reach out to the homeowners. We need to talk to the homeowners for the first time in the hearing. So I would say that planning department needs to reach out to the homeowner, determine if that homeowner has an objection or if they're satisfied based on what's transpired so far. And if the homeowner objects, then we would have to continue the hearing to a time where we can meet in person.
So I guess,
If the homeowner doesn't object, then it sounds like that we would be able to close the hearing.
so then do you suggest we not take a vote on the site plan approval?
That's what I would say.
And why in the world we didn't know this an hour ago?
Exactly.
Or 2 hours ago, or 3 days ago, because I talked to the manager about this, and I said, I know an objection is going to be filed. This is just absurd. We have to have a better procedure for doing this.
And I would like to state for the record that this site plan came before the Board of Adjustment 2 months ago, Planning Board a month ago. All joining property owners were notified at that time for those 2 hearings too, and it is the first time that the Planning Department has heard this also. So I don't know when the emails was received, if it was today, yesterday, a week ago.
No email has been received that's germane. There was an email that was received, but it was received from someone who has no standing, and who knew they had no standing, but just was
When I told her this morning that she had no standing, she got
expressing
it.
their complaint. So,
And let me just, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, this is B4, this is by right, it's past the planning board, it's past TRC. It's our job to uphold our UDO, and this is a complete waste of time.
Mr. Mayor,
yep. Yes, sir.
Matt Grant. Just for the record, I want it to be on there that we're having these discussions because a council member has talked to a neighbor prior to a quasi-judicial hearing, which my understanding is not allowed because the decision is supposed to be made on facts presented during the case. So just want to put that in there.
I don't believe quasi-judicial limits me from doing research.
No, I'm sorry.
I just can't.
He's correct, John.
I
He's
cannot
correct.
form an opinion because I will tell you I'm for this. Okay, so maybe I shouldn't say that now because we still haven't made a motion. But this is my ward, and I spoke to the neighbors to see if they had any concerns. That's all I did. That is not. No. Prior to that, I had received an email that said that the meeting, that they wanted the meeting postponed until it was in public. The letter that was sent to us didn't say that the person had to have standing. It only said that if anyone objects to a online meeting on a quasi-judicial issue, it is automatically postponed until it can be held in person.
Okay, all right. I think we've already figured out what we're supposed to do. Is that all right? What Leah said? We're going to keep it open for 24 hours. Is that right?
I would think that we could keep it open for 24
You know,
hours.
I could eat a can of alphabet soup and crap out a better argument than what you got. So let's stop. Are we done?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so,
Can I ask a question? The developer, Ken Whitley, can I ask a question real quick?
yes.
So if this person says they have an objection, for example, one of these 3 items, let's say, for example, he doesn't like the fact that the gate is accessible 24 hours a day.
That's not the point right now. The point,
It's not going to be approved?
no, it's just a delay in my opinion. It's not if I understand what our attorney told us, a person with standing has a unilateral right to say, I want it postponed, I have standing until such time as I can be heard in person.
Okay.
And we just learned a few minutes ago that allegedly such a person exists. And so we're trying to get around that, and I think Councilman Stafford is trying to work around that with us as well.
Okay.
Yes, sir, Mr. Foster.
Mayor, do you think we need to go into
Mayor,
closed session before we go any further, so we won't?
Talking to you, Mike.
Do you think we need to go into closed session for just a moment to clear this up?
No, I don't think there's anything that's a closed session matter at this point, Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, it looks like, Mayor, that we've addressed a lot of the concerns that the gentleman has anyway, that all of the property does not have 24-hour access because they got to have a pass key to get to this. All right. Mr. Grant spoke to the idea of the lighting and the opaque buffer when he states that due to the grading on the west part of the property, after they cut that property down, they're gonna be downgrade from this homeowner anyway. So the lighting issue and the buffer issue becomes a moot issue because of those things. Now, what was the other condition that he was concerned about?
Those are the three.
Okay, if those are the three, then,
Well, the problem, though, is Mr. Stafford has represented to the guy that, I mean, it doesn't matter what the conditions are, as I understand it. If he just, all he had to do was write the same email that we got from somebody who had standing, said, I don't want it heard
Okay.
until,
But-
but what we need to find out,
can we proceed now to approve it tentative upon Mr. Stafford's conveying these?
Or the planning department conveying
Planning board.
those
right,
conditions.
that's what I was gonna ask Lee if we could do, is we
We
could
can do
keep the
that. I'm
public
good.
hearing open for a day and do it subject to there being no adverse comment over the next 24 hours.
I would think that would be
All
the,
right. All right, then
Yes, and our ability to get in touch with this homeowner that has standing that John has talked to and make sure that that person doesn't have a formal objection to the hearing being held remotely.
Okay, Sherry will take care of that. All right. If there's nothing else, I'm going to declare the public hearing closed, subject to the conditions we mentioned earlier, which is 24, if there are any comments within the next 24 hours, it will be kept open until June the 1st. Otherwise, the public hearing will be closed. Is there a motion? I guess the motion needs since it's quasi-judicial, it needs to be a recitation of facts from your presentation. Is that correct, Sherry?
Make your
All right.
findings of
And I
fact.
guess what we're seeking is a motion to approve the site plan subject to the conditions we said before, which is receiving clarification that the adjoining property owner that Mr. Stafford spoke with does not in fact have a formal objection to the proceeding. And that's okay, Leah?
Oh, yes, it is.
Okay. Are you?
I would make that motion.
All right, and, okay, well, if you don't mind, it would, we probably need some of the discussion that appears in the second paragraph of our summary of information to be included as statements of fact for the,
Well, Mr. Mayor, I will offer a motion then that I find, it's my belief that the findings of fact are in order and that the applicant has by right the opportunity to do these things, and I believe that the conditions that have been raised have been met due to the site preparation, and the site preparation would bring it into order with our UDO, and I find the findings of fact to be in order.
And I'll second that motion.
all right, there's a motion and a second that the site plan be approved, once again, subject to a determination prior to the conclusion of the public hearing period, which is 24 hours from now, that there, in fact, is no formal objection to the public hearing being conducted, and that it should not be continued beyond that time. And you understand that, and you'll provide the name to,
yeah, I can show you the parcel number, yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Clarification on your motion, Mr. Johnson. Are you saying that the existing vegetation is a sufficient buffer, or that on the west side there would be requirement that it be an opaque buffer on the west portion of this property?
Well, I'm going to refer to what Ms. Ashley, I think she effectively addressed that issue a little bit of but when the grading is done, there will be an inspection, and she'll make the determination at that time as to whether that buffer comes in compliance with the UDO.
Okay.
Now, the UDO does not require an opaque buffer. It requires a buffer with so many points of landscape, and we will make sure they meet that.
I think, though, the combination of the fact that this property is going to be cut down is going to create a bank behind this property owner. So this that parking lot would be below grade of his home. I think the combination of being downgrade from that home and the vegetated buffer that our UDO calls for that she can't enforce, I think that would be adequate.
Okay, then, just for clarification, now you have, the planning board did require an opaque buffer on the southern side, which is B4 to B4.
Because they wanted, because they were allowing utilitarian metal, keeping with the intent of architectural, and that's what they've done in the past, consistency. Anytime they've allowed you to change that material, they have required that additional screening as a trade-off.
Okay, so, but without the actual verbiage that there's an opaque buffer on the western side, whatever is there, as long as it meets the UDO for vegetation.
For the points, that's required in the 30-foot buffer.
So it could easily be quite visible from those homeowners' property.
You could see through it, but it's not supposed to be open. I mean, it's not going to be opaque. You're not going to see green, but you may be able to see some through it a little bit, but it's not solid opaque.
Okay, and how is that judgment made? Is that made in December, or is that judgment made?
Well, I mean, we'll probably get our arborist to go out and take a look with us that can identify what trees are deciduous and evergreen and what they might need to plant. So it's not just me or my site plan reviewer. We enlist our arborist to help us figure that out.
Because what I'm hoping to do is get clarification that this homeowner, that we've met his needs, so this does move forward. And
unless it's a condition for opaque buffer, staff will enforce what your Unified Development Ordinance says as far as points in a 30-foot buffer are.
Mr. Stafford, do you
30-foot
think?
buffer is pretty substantial if it's covered with plants.
It's our largest.
And an opaque fence is not completely opaque. You can still see through it.
Oh, and I don't think it's a fence that we're talking about, is it? It's a evergreen line, correct?
Right, there's existing vegetation out there. And they want to keep most of that. But anytime there's gaps in that, the ordinance requires you to fill in those gaps.
And it's gonna be downgrade from his home. I think that's
It'll be all right.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
No.
If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Or any opposed? All right, the motion tentatively carries unanimously.
Mr. Mayor, I should apologize for my crass remark. It was unnecessary, but called for. Thank you.
That's been so long
All right, item 10 is all, oh, I'm sorry, item 9 is to conduct thank you, Mr. Whitley and Mr. Grant. Appreciate your time.
Have a good day.
Yes, sir. Item 9 is to conduct a public hearing and consider approving first reading of rezoning request ZC 20-03, filed by Calvary Baptist Church for property located at 504 Whites Mill Road, from heavy industrial to R15, which is urban fringe low density residential. And this is, yeah, no, he doesn't. Does the pastor need to be sworn?
No, this is just a rezoning.
Okay. All right.
Legislative
And,
decision.
Pastor Crabtree, you're on the line with us?
I am, yes, sir.
Okay, well, this may go a little bit differently than the last one, we hope.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah,
Ms. Ashley.
this is a legislative decision. The mayor said it was told you the location, 504 Whites Mill Road. You do have the GIS map up on the screen. It shows you the property of the church, the existing sanctuary, fellowship hall, accessory buildings to the church. It's to rezone the property from currently heavy industrial to our R15, which is more low-density residential district. The property is a little over 9 acres. It's currently in our ETJ, so it's outside city limits. However, they are utilizing city water and city electric at this time. And the purpose for the rezoning is basically to allow the church to expand in the near future. The current HI zoning does not allow churches, so the property is currently non-conforming. When we evaluate rezoning cases, we share with you what the adjoining land uses are. And if you look to the north and the east of this site, you'll see R15M. That's our urban fringe low-density residential. It does allow manufactured housing. There are single-family homes and modular homes in this area. The subdivision is known as the Pinehurst Forest subdivision. As you travel south going clockwise, the rest of the property is heavy industrial. Majority of this is undeveloped. And then as you're traveling on around to the west side, we do have that as H115, which is our Shelton Avenue Corridor Overlay District. There are some single-family homes, but there's also a non-conforming heavy industry, and that's Godfrey Lumber Company that's located adjacent to this property. The 2005 Land Development Plan, we are currently in the process of updating that plan. You'll see up on the screen the star indicates the approximate location of the church. The color pink shows that the majority of this area is proposed to be mixed use in the future. What mixed use allows is residential, office, retail, a mixture of uses, and that can include schools, churches, recreational facilities. So the planning board and staff recommendation is favorable because the 2000 land use plan does project this to be mixed use, even though it's zoned industrial and it's surrounded by low density residential. Other heavy industrial properties and H115 corridor. The property currently exists as a church, has a fellowship hall located on it. Churches, schools, parks, etc. are allowed uses in residential districts and would fit into mixed use category. Utilities such as city water and city electric are available to support the development. Sewer is also available in the immediate area. So if they came in the future and wanted to expand and they needed sewer, the possibility of annexation and tying into our sewers could be likely. The site plan approval, when they get ready to do their expansions, they would have to come and get TRC approval only. It would not have to come to planning board or city council, just staff internal review. And therefore, the planning board and staff's recommendation is favorable to rezone this property, and it does require a consistency statement. I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have, and as the mayor stated, Mr. Crabtree, the associate pastor, is also on the phone.
Any questions of Mrs. Ashley before I declare the public hearing open?
Sherry, why are churches not allowed in HI?
That's just not a particular location where you would have churches go. That's more your like industrial tax-based jobs, those kinds of things.
I know that, but I've seen around several vacant industrial sites that have become churches. Is it something that we want to look at to allow churches in heavy industrial? Not change this zoning moving forward.
That would be a decision by council. If that, we haven't seen it as the need to change to allow. We've not had that many requests.
Okay.
Like for example, with this one, it makes sense to rezone it to a conforming zoning district where they'd be able to expand. If this was out in an industrial park, I don't think we would want to encourage a church to go in just a vacant industrial building like in the Statesville Business Park. So I don't think, in my opinion as staff, I don't think it's to the point where you need to do a text amendment.
I agree. I think
can
we should.
give you an anecdotal example of this. Years ago, we had some heavy manufacturing in the southern end of the county. Churches at that time were permitted to go in there by right. They did that. We had constant complaints from the church on Sunday morning about that noisy plant right next door to it. And the plant was there first. So
Yeah.
it's a good reason not to allow it.
And we also don't allow storefront churches for that very reason. Downtown, we want to have retail sales and services, and so we don't allow storefront churches in our downtown for those specific reasons.
Okay, and then if you don't mind putting the map back up, I've got another. Yeah, no, well, that one's good. Actually, the other one with the zone, you see the 3 parcels that are residential units? The one to the south, I guess it would be, and the 2 to the north? Okay, the tax value on that land is $40,000 an acre, but they're residential houses, and those folks are paying $40,000 an acre on their taxes, as opposed to across the street, they're paying under 8 per acre. Would it not be, and you might have answered this, that are we looking at rezoning that entire area and bringing that tax value within reason for those residential properties, or?
The way the city has consistently done rezonings is by property owner request. If those 3 residential properties wanted to come in and request for theirs to be rezoned, they could. The city, since I've been here, since 2005, we've not gone out and rezoned somebody's property involuntarily.
Well, now Godfrey Lumber didn't ask to be brought into H-115, did they?
That was a combination of a whole district. It wasn't 1 or 2 properties. It was actually, I'd have to go back to the chart, but there were several properties, the whole 115 corridor, and that was because we were getting ready to do a master plan for the area.
But so you're saying that for those 3 property owners, they would have to each petition, the church didn't care that they were paying $40,000 an acre because they were tax exempt, but these folks are paying $40,000 an acre on their single-family residence lots when right across the street, they're under $8,000.
And we have several properties like that. If you go out East Front Street, the whole First Street Bakery Lane, all that's zoned commercial. That's a single-family residential neighborhood. If you know, if those people want to come in, sometimes you have the opposite. I want to keep my property HI because after I live in it, I want to sell it and let it be industrial. I want to sell it and let it be commercial. So we let that be the option of the property owner. You know, if the property owners have a problem that they think the value's too high, they can give us a call and we'll help walk them through the rezoning process if that's something they want to do, and that'll remedy their concern if that's what they're interested in.
What's that cost on that process?
A rezoning, it's $500.
So about 1 year's taxes for those folks. Okay.
I have a question concerning this matter. Basically, what I've heard here, and then knowing that in the area with the church, with the pastor, and it's an individual, you all can hear me, the individual is the lack of knowledge, of knowing. I would like to change that factor. And I know that in my ward, in Mr. Foster's ward, and I know that basically this is a county, but giving people the opportunity to know what's taking place, they can make a decision. But most of the time, people don't even know what's going on. So I would like to see a collaboration at place. And if they don't come out, that's fine and well. But to be able to say, this is what's happening, this is a plan, and give that information out and let it be rendered. If the pastor, he doesn't have to, but I like for a collaboration, he and I, and get with Mr. Foster or council, however we do it, to be able to bring this information out to the public and let them know what's actually taking place within their area, within our you know, because 8,000 to 40,000, church is going to be productive. That's a part of society. But I really want this to be visual.
And for the record, we did notify all the adjoining property owners, so those 3 individual lots were notified that this rezoning's taken place.
Yeah. All right, so we all know that information. Now we can convey it to our constituents as they see fit. We haven't had the public hearing yet. So any other questions of Sherry
Sherry,
before?
quick question. About changing just one little area, this will not hurt or affect any prospects of any more businesses coming to that area?
This is parcel specific, so the only parcel being rezoned is the church that requested theirs.
So it won't hurt any future expansion?
What we look at for future parcels is like some of the things I showed you surrounding land use, utilities, what small area plans, what master plans, what the land use plan. So that's a decision to be determined through that process.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, just going back to when you said the new master plan, showing that as a different area. Is that something you think that in the next couple of years, I mean, basically these folks are paying 6 times more property value than their neighbors are. Is that something that's going to be happening, that they don't have to spend that $500 to petition
I mean,
or?
that could be a result of your land use plan. When you update your land use plan, if there's areas that are projected to be residential that are heavy industrial or commercial, you could look at those. The city could, do things where they could make the decision as a council, we want to waive the fee for anyone who comes in and wants to change it. I mean, there are options that you can choose. I just don't have those answers right now because we're in the middle of a plan update.
Okay, because I just, that one little finger to the north is obviously going to probably, it has no value as heavy industrial sitting there. So,
All right, I'm going to declare the public hearing open. Pastor Crabtree, you got anything to say about this?
No, I don't have any comments right now. Miss Sherry did a pretty good job.
Well, you're not listening very carefully then. We're not doing a very good job. Thank you for being on with us.
I'm listening real carefully.
We're going to take care of you, right?
They spoke money. I mean, somebody ought to tell them they have an option to do that.
Yeah. Right.
But as far as that $500 fee, I mean, we had to pay it, and so if they want to get theirs rezoned, I guess they do too.
Thank you, sir. All right, I'm going to declare the public hearing closed, subject to the same conditions you've heard ad nauseum.
Okay.
Is there a motion?
I'd like to make the motion that we'll go ahead and make those changes, as Sherry said, changing it from HI to, let's see, residential.
R15.
R15, yeah.
R15.
And that'll be first reading, so we'll have to have a second reading on this on June the 1st.
I'll second that.
All right, second by Mr. Stafford. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of approving first reading of the rezoning from HI to R15, please say aye.
Aye.
Are any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Thanks for all your work tonight, Ms. Ashley. And I guess if you'll ask Mr. Harrell to come in, we'll receive information on a proposed new chapter to the city code.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council.
Thank you, Mr. Crabtree.
The purpose of this tonight is just simply to introduce you to a couple policies staff is proposing to be added to the city code in the form.
You need to jam that microphone down your throat so that we can hear.
Is this better?
That's
that
way
sounds better. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll start over. Thank you, Mayor and council. The purpose of this tonight is just to introduce you to a couple policies that staff is proposing to be added to the city code in the form of a new chapter. These are both related to stormwater, so I just want to introduce you to them, kind of go over where they came from, what they enable staff to do, and then where we plan to go from there. So starting out, as you are aware, the city has an NPDES stormwater permit, which is, you can see how the acronym plays out there, issued by the state of North Carolina, which requires us to do certain things. There are 6 items listed there on the screen, 6 key program functions that we are required to do as a city. We have 5 years to implement those 6 activities. So the permit was issued in November of 2016, so we have about a year and a half left till November of 2021 in order to implement all of those. I'm happy to say that 5 out of 6 are either in place or underway, so we're making good progress. So the first item I want to talk to you about tonight is number 3, illicit discharge detection and elimination, which is a fancy way of saying things are going to the storm drain system that shouldn't be. The official definition of an illicit discharge is something that is non-stormwater, that is also not allowed by the Clean Water Act. And so what this proposed language will do is define what an illicit discharge or an illicit connection is. It could be something like sewage, or a floor drain, or processed water, or a commercial car wash, anything that should be going to the sanitary sewer system for treatment and is instead being routed to, dumped in, spilled in, however it's getting to the storm drainage system. It is a requirement for us to look for those, identify those, and work with property owners and responsible parties to correct those connections and discharges. So the language we're proposing would define what those are. It also defines things that aren't illicit discharges, things like charity car washes, or washing your car in your driveway, or condensation from an air conditioning unit, things like that. There are several things listed that are not illicit discharges, so it gives staff guidance on what to be looking for. It also will then grant city staff the right to enter, right to inspect properties when there is a reason to believe there's an illicit discharge there. We are not going to hire staff to go police things. This will be conducted with existing staff, whether we receive a complaint, when we have reason to believe there's an issue at a property, or just in the course of our everyday business, we observe something that makes us think there's a reason to check it out further. It goes further to define the different types of violations based on the severity, what the impact has been to public health, to the water quality, and then basically outlines a process for us to work with property owners and responsible parties to correct these matters. The ultimate goal is to preserve water quality in the city of Statesville. And in the event where we are not able to gain compliance through conversation in reasonable manners, it does establish enforcement procedures, including notice of violations, or we can hold permits if that's an option, and we can also issue civil penalties if needed to gain compliance. So that in a nutshell is the illicit discharge language. You see it in your packet there as an ordinance proposing that language for the city code. The second policy, and I'll have a time to ask any questions after I go through both of them. The second policy is tail ditch maintenance. This is not a stormwater permit required activity, but it is an activity that was included in the stormwater program scope when council adopted the program and set the utility fee back in September of 2018. As you may be aware, most of our stormwater infrastructure, like you see the curb inlet there in the top picture, that collects water, discharges it to a pipe, and that pipe has to discharge somewhere to a ditch, to a creek. In a lot of cases, those ditches are off right-of-way, and due to a 1995 resolution, city forces are not allowed to work off right-of-way. So over time, a lot of these tail ditches have become grown-up, blocked. They do not carry water the way they should. It backs water up into our stormwater infrastructure and causes damage to the structures. It undermines the pipes, that sort of thing. So this, the additional language in this chapter would provide guidelines for when staff could go off right away to do tail ditch maintenance. It would be limited to city-initiated work, although we would certainly respond to citizen requests for us to take a look at something on their property. And if it fits within the guidelines of this policy, then we would proceed with it. We would gain right of entry agreements, and permanent maintenance easements where necessary. And again, the point is to improve the performance of the storm drainage system and avoid costly repairs and improvements down the road. And as with the illicit discharge, this will not require the hiring of any additional staff or any additional budget. The stormwater budget, when it was established, included these activities because they were anticipated and directed by council to be included. So those are the two policies you have in your packet. No decision is being requested tonight. This is simply for information, for your consideration. A couple procedural items. To insert this as a chapter, it would be Chapter 20 because City Code is arranged alphabetically. So the current Chapter 20, which is streets and sidewalks, will be moved and renumbered to Chapter 21. And then one other item, Section 1.7 of the code has language on civil penalties for general violations of city ordinances and codes. Because this chapter would have its own civil penalty descriptions, it was just a slight amendment to that section to allow to eliminate the conflict between Section 1 and the proposed Chapter 20. So you'll see that, I just mentioned those are minor, but you'll see that in the language of the ordinance as you look through them. And so now, a lot of information in a short period of time, but I'll be happy to answer any questions. What we anticipate is putting the first reading of this ordinance on the June 1st meeting, second reading on June 15th, and then upon approval of a second reading, staff is prepared to initiate these and implement these policies immediately. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Harrell?
Scott, are you proposing that we do away with Resolution 2195 or amend it substantially?
That will be in the language on the first reading to, at this point, appeal it because it's a very general. It just simply says the city staff will not work on storm drainage outside the right-of-way.
Okay.
So what we would appeal it or repeal it, and then replace it with the language in this proposed chapter, which simply says here's when staff can work outside the right-of-way, and it's limited to tail ditch maintenance.
Okay. And then my other question is, connect the city's storm drainage network.
Mhm.
Can I get clarification of what that is?
It is any creek or streams, what I was trying to say, in the public waters, and then on the structural side, any city-maintained structure or pipe or drainage way.
So for instance, if I take a pipe that goes under Cherry Street, and then it goes under Walnut Street, and it goes under Front Street, and it continues heading south under Sharp Street, and then dumps into the creek on Sharp Street, is that entire pipe the city's storm drainage network, or only the pipes that are underneath the streets?
The proposed definition for the municipal storm sewer system is the system of conveyances, including sidewalks, roads with drainage systems, municipal streets, catch basins, curbs, gutters, ditches, man-made channels, or storm drains owned and operated by the city of Statesville and designed for use for collecting or conveying stormwater.
So to get clarification, if this pipe is cleared and jetted underneath Cherry Street, and the city comes in and jets it and clears underneath Walnut Street, but doesn't clear it between those two streets as it runs through those private properties, we really, in essence, haven't cleaned our storm drain system at all. Is that pipe part of the city's storm drain network, or would we say that that's not part of our network? So basically, we're just clearing a pipe under a street, but the water still can't flow to the next section.
All right, so this is a continuous pipe you're referring to.
A continuous pipe,
Yeah,
yes.
the portion of pipe that is outside city right-of-way would not be a city-maintained pipe.
So we'll
This
never
policy is
clean.
This policy is referring to open ditches that we can see. We're not getting to that point yet.
So we may need to address that, because if we clean the pipe under the street, but it's clogged 5 feet away from that, we're still having mud and muck and dirt, if the water can get through it, flow on into our stormwater system.
And that is a scenario that exists possibly there
Yeah.
and in other places we know about. And at this point, we don't have the resources or the authority to go into private property, dig up pipes and repair them. That
Right.
was a lot of what the 1995 ordinance was trying to get us out of, because even if the property owner agreed that if you just fix it, I'll be done, we were never really out of it. It seems that that's the recollection. I wasn't here in 1995, but that's the recollection I got from folks as to why that ordinance was passed. In this case, this language is specifically addressing tail ditches, open flows, not pipe networks where we can see what's there, and in cases we'd be getting easements to maintain them in perpetuity afterwards, but not going to the point of closed pipe networks across private property at this point.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Harrell, I'm in support of what you're trying to do here. What I'm concerned about as we move forward is how we're going to administer it. We're basically going to repeal the part that says we can't go off right away. So we're going to go on, now we're going to go on to personal property. That's when you begin to make judgment calls about when you will and when you won't, and whose problem gets attended to first. Have you given any thought as how you're going to prioritize these things? Are you going to weigh public safety, individual health of the individual property owner and the preservation of their property? Have you given any thought of how you're going to prioritize that?
Yes, sir. There are criteria listed. It's in section 20-52 in the proposed chapter. Basically, first off, it's got to be in the city limits. It has to have been, if it's in a residential area, certificate of occupancies have to have been issued at least 10 years prior. We're not going to come in and fix new issues. We're looking for older, long-standing issues. Property owner has to be willing to allow us to do it. In some cases, we may have an issue we want to correct. The property owner didn't initiate that call, but they have to agree and sign a right of entry agreement, and if necessary, an easement for us to do the work. And then also, yes, it certainly has, it has to create a threat to our infrastructure, to public safety, to some An instance, the 2 blocks from here on Green Street, South Green Street, a couple years ago, there was a sinkhole opened up on private property from a closed pipe network that was out the right of way. It wasn't in city jurisdiction, but that sinkhole kept growing, and it got to the point where it was right at the edge of the sidewalk. So it was definitely, it was unsafe. We had to close the sidewalk. So we contacted the property owner, got a right of entry agreement, and went in and repaired it to the point that we could safely open the sidewalk. And that's how this would work in a similar manner.
Okay, thanks, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, we appreciate the good work, and we'll look forward to the next presentation at June 1st, I guess.
And I'll add, if you review this and have any questions in the meantime, please feel free to contact me, and I'll respond. And if we need to tweak things, we'd be happy to do so.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One census update and plea again. We are improving, but we're way behind our neighbors to the south. Troutman and Mooresville are running about 10% self-response higher than Statesville. We have certain isolated pockets in the city that are way behind the average, and we're going to be taking some steps to get those numbers up. But we are improving. We thank the citizens that have sent in their self-responses. We encourage everyone to do so. You know the financial implications of not doing it. Maybe as much as $2,500 per resident per year. So it's very, very important to continue our efforts. If you see folks, please remind them that it's a simple, I think, one-page completion to do that. The good news and the bad news is that they have extended the deadline because of the pandemic. I think that's good because it gives us more time, but it's bad because it gives people a reason to procrastinate. So please, please help our city by encouraging all of your neighbors to participate in the census. Anything else, Mr. Smith? Anything? All right. Is there a motion that we adjourn?
So moved.
Motion and second. All in favor? Thank you. We are adjourned.